That was it. They also had a visit from somebody from Solvay. This was Martin, who you know. And he was very helpful. He actually took them all out to a meal, because that's what pharmaceutical companies often do.
How was his on Monday?
And he talked to them, and it was very nice, and he then gave them a box of Creon. But the trouble is, even if it's a big box of Creon, if you've got 50 patients and they're going to take 15 pills a day or something, it gets used up. So they had visits out, they had visitors in, and in fact they had a lot of visitors in. So much so that when Dorothea said to them, "We've got Dr. Chris Rolls coming to see you," they went, "Oh," and the head of the department said, "Well, I'm going on holiday and I'm not coming back for him." And he told his assistant, who was a quite beautiful young lady, "You have to come back from your holiday to see this Dr. Rolls." So I turned up in Russia and looked around the Moscow airport. Here was this beautiful woman, and it turned out she was looking for me. This was great. And I went to the department and I learned something, but they were so used to people with false promises. And when I said, "If we bring a lot of money or we want to do something, would you like that?" "Yeah." But it was really, well, we've had this. Now, what we then did, we actually did something, we promised something and we delivered. And what we said was, we're going to do this twinning. This was an idea we developed together. And you're going to have your Moscow clinic and you're going to have your Southampton clinic. And I visited you. Now, 3 of you visit us. And then our nurse will visit you with the physiotherapist and the dietitian. And then the people on your side who do the physiotherapy and the dietetics, they will come back to us. And every time we do this, we will stay in your homes if we possibly can. And when they came, we did not include a conference. They sat in the clinic, they went on the ward rounds, they came to our homes, they went to the homes of the patients to see how we looked after them. They would spend a whole evening with the CF nurse. They weren't nearly as advanced as our Indian colleagues, I have to say, in the way they ran their service. But the fact was, we were now doing a constant interchange between 2 centres. We had a secretary, Sam, some of you may have met Sam on the board, who did our database at that time and the filing. And she went to Moscow and looked at how they did their filing and sorted it out. She was just a junior secretary. And then they had a grandmother in Russia who was the grandmother of a patient who was helping in their admin. And she came to us to do the same thing. So what we were doing was twinning not just the doctors, the physiotherapist, the nurses, the dietitian. We had 3 medical students from Southampton went over to Sushil and did a project. We kept this thing going back. We had parents going back and forth. We had everybody. Now, the beauty of that was that because their nurse and their physio and their dietitian and their doctors knew us as a team, these were 2 teams working together, it meant it was very easy to telephone to each other and ask, can we do this, can we do that, how do we do it? Or we would talk to them and we'd say, look, there's a conference coming, would you like to join with us, and we'll do some projects. So apart from this big project with Solvay, which actually was very important, we did a lot of other projects because we had got such a strong link. Now, at the same time as this was going on, I had actually visited St. Petersburg, which is the 2nd big city of Russia, where they also had a CF clinic that was developing with 1 or 2 very good doctors, but they were fairly internalized. They did a little work if patients were sent to them from outside, but they didn't do any outreach, and they were to themselves. But I said to them, do you have links? And they said, oh yes, we have good links. And what do you have? Well, they had something a little better than this, because they had had a doctor from Denmark came and talked to them about CF care, and they had done some things he advised, but they then had a physiotherapist from Sweden who told them something a little bit different, and then they had the microbiologist from somewhere else. And so what they had was, they had a traditional link up, but they were links with all different places for different bits. And that never worked as well. This, to my mind, was one of the most successful projects I've been involved with, but it was important because of this traffic. And so when we wrote this up, and Sushil wrote to me and said, look, I've read about what you did in Russia and I would like to do something. My feeling was, let's follow a little bit this model in an appropriate way. In other words, I went to Moscow, to Delhi first, and we talked about what his needs were and his problems, the size of the issue, where the budgets came from, who pays for what. And then Sushil came over to us with some of his team, and we have sent some of our team back to him on a number of occasions. And by having this interchange, I think the twinning is much more valuable than the sporadic contact, however good these people are. And my feeling is, I'll sort of put this in for discussion later, is that each of our colleagues in India, if this was a line they were to go down, would link with somewhere. Now they can't, or we can't have 5 or 10 links all with Gary, otherwise he'd stop doing any patients of his own. But if you had good links with Liverpool or Dundee, that you would, but having made the link, you would have a multidisciplinary link and not this disparate link. So my lessons were learned on this in terms of costs, and the practical way of handling it was doing this. A last point, in Russia, the children were not treated in a very human way. It was drab and grey. I felt when I first went to their wards in Moscow that you could take a colour photograph with a black and white film. Because you went in the ward and everything was grey. The walls were grey and grimy, the beds were grey, the bedding was grey, even the children looked grey, and it was horrible. Now, we didn't say anything to them about how we run something. But they came to our wards and they looked at the paintings and the colour and they said, oh, we can't paint our walls and our windows like this, it's too expensive. And our play therapist said, well, all these paintings on the glass that you can see, these were all done by a local art school as a competition. They were free. Now they did this exchanges back and forth, and if you go back to Moscow, and we never made any suggestions, we can go back to Moscow, and you go into a grey hospital and there's grey ward here and a grey ward there and a grey ward there, and you walk into the CF ward and suddenly the colour is up. And they have colour, paintings and light because of this exchange. But the most important thing is that they have now spread that to 22 other centres in Russia that are now running CF centres, and they've got a protocol for them. And I went to one of these in Siberia. This was my last contact with Russia. I went to Siberia to this hospital, to a conference, and I said, can I go to the hospital? It was a big city, a place called Novosibirsk. It's the 4th biggest city in Russia, and I'd never heard of it. But it was a secret city for a long time. It's where they used to do all their nuclear things. And they had a huge children's hospital. And I went in, and I went into their CF ward, and it was colourful and bright, and tricycles and balloons. I said, this is wonderful. How did you get this idea? They said, oh, we learned this from Moscow. So it was nothing to do with us now. It was them. And I feel that the CF care that you are enlightened, and many of your colleagues will be, but there may be towns and places where people are still a little old-fashioned and a little out of place. And the real messenger of the good news is you and your outreach, or you'll have you will have a base, if it's Chandigarh or something like that, and then you'll have the kind of cogwheel effect. You'll have your associated centres that you train and develop, and maybe twice a year these people come to you or you visit them and see patients. So the answer is, I absolutely believe that you can do a huge amount with poor resources or limited resources on this basis, and with the dedication of the team that do it. So I feel very enthusiastic, and I'll stop. Thank you.